Post is reporting that groups backed by, maybe this is why, far-left billionaire George Soros and other dark money groups have funded the outrage to the tune of $20 million so far. The CEO of a crowd rental company says paid protester requests have surged 400%.
Wait a minute. Did they say a crowd rental company? This is just wild, yo. I mean, this is not the America, back in the day, man. And look, I wasn't living in the 60s, but back in the 60s, during civil rights, the one of the most tumultuous times arguably of the country's history. People went to protest, but I don't think they was getting paid to go protest, but now it's like, people aren't even about really anything. They're just really about, okay. And here's the thing. George Soros, I'm not going to get deep into him, but you have a lot of left-wing rich people who don't really care about, in my opinion, they don't really care about these left-wing issues. They don't really care about these liberal ideas. It's really about control and just being able to oppose the other side. And even like I said, at the last Liberation Day, they were asking people in New York. I remember seeing an interview where a guy was asking somebody who was protesting out there, protesting about immigration, and asking this person, basic questions like, well, why are you out here? What's your particular beef? What do you want to happen? How do you think immigration should be in XYZ? I mean, 9 times out of 10, people are just not familiar with the actual issues that they're supposed to be protesting over. And it's really more about, following the crowd. People are extremely sheepish when it comes to these protests. And why would you go and protest that? Because at the end of the day, their goal is to bring crime down. Even if crime is at a 25-year low, why not bring it even lower? Because the crimes that have been happening in DC as of late, it's been a little crazy. And I can understand why people will be out there protesting, but if you getting paid, if you're a 22-year-old college kid, or even an 18-year-old, an adult, 18-year-old high school graduate, right, who hasn't even gone to college or whatever, and someone gives you $200 to go protest for 5 hours, hell yeah, you're gonna go do it. You know why? Because why wouldn't you? You ain't got nothing else to do. You probably not making as much money at a real job. So instead of Soros and all these other people funding these protests, why not help to create actual jobs? Because what's coming up, and I've talked about this in a couple episodes back, what's actually coming up for the young people who are out there protesting, right? The young people who are out there protesting, who are getting paid, who are protesting everything, immigration, protesting this police takeover or federal takeover in DC. The young people out there protesting who really aren't really deep into the issue or really understand why they're protesting, don't understand that the jobs, you should be more worried about whether you're going to fit into the upcoming economy that's coming on with AI and how the job market is changing and stuff like that. So, when you really look at it, and again, I'm going to get deeper into the whole crime conversation, but crime is always going to be a problem when you have too much of it, especially in big cities. And even small towns as well, because what it does, it ruins the whole situation for people's everyday living. Business is not going to be there, so as business continues to leave because of high taxes and high crime. Even the story in Cincinnati, that big brawl that happened, there was a guy with a small company. I think he had about 30 employees. I think it was some type of a tech company. I can't remember if it was tech or public relations, whatever. But the guy who owned the company in Cincinnati was talking about, after that brawl that recently happened, that he is moving his company out of downtown Cincinnati because there's too much crime. People are taking a shit outside of his business. And this is downtown Cincinnati. People are pissing outside of the business. People are fighting. It's violent. So crime is definitely something that again, I think the reason why people have issues with this government takeover in DC, and again, I think this is a temporary temporary takeover. It doesn't necessarily solve the problem long term for crime. I do agree with that. They may suppress crime in DC for some time, and then it'll probably come back if underlying issues are not solved. So I do concede that point. But the reality is that crime is a real issue. And here's my thing before I get into further into this. The reason why crime is actually an issue, because when you start looking at the behavior of people, it's more brazen. People are not, like I said, these crimes are not just happening in the inner city, in the hood. They're happening in downtown areas, what you call affluent areas, non-black areas. The crimes are happening there too, like I said. So, again, I always tell people to get out of the basic conversation. The reality is you got to look at let's take a look at crime for a minute. Let's just take a look at how it's, you know at least from 2021 to 2023. Let's just talk about that. So crime is, now this is from US Facts, right? So let's go through that. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Let's go through crime. So let's take a look from the top. This is the national homicide rate decreased from 2021 to 2023, right? So they talk about, this data is published by the CDC, and which means that we have to have approximate city homicide numbers from county data, right? Some counties map to a single city, so their data is the most straightforward. Others contain multiple cities or a broader metropolitan area, so this data is less exact, but still instructive, right? So let's talk about Chicago for a minute, right? So even Brandon Johnson in Chicago. Let me stop sharing this for a second. Even Brandon Johnson in Chicago, I arguably, to me, one of the worst mayors in America. Um, Simply because, and I say that because I just think that he's not somebody who is honest about the actual problems of the city that he's governing, right? And that's concerning to me. you know, this whole landscape of Republican Democrat isn't really the issue to me. It's really more about, acknowledging are you actually acknowledging what's really going on in the city or area that you're governing, and that's what scares me. I think politicians are more worried about, like, keeping their seat and representing their party, that they don't even care, to me, what's actually going on. And that's what's very, very strange. I'm going to get into a video with Hakeem Jefferies in a minute that kind of illustrates that point. But back to crime, like, okay, so in Illinois, so Cook County is a county that I grew up in for a huge part of my life. Cook County has the largest county in Chicago, is the largest county in Chicago metropolitan area, had 805 homicides, the most in the nation, right? The second highest was Los Angeles, right? With 659 homicides. So the top five homicide rates amongst large population centers, those having more than 1 million residents. That's how they come up with this number. So this is the top five of large population centers. Number one is Memphis, Tennessee, right? Memphis. Number two is St. Louis, right? Number three, Baltimore, right? Number four, Washington, D.C., the very place that is being taken over right now. Now, again, these stats are from 2021 to 2023. Now, the mayor of D.C., did argue that, hey, crime is down from that 2023 number. But still crime nonetheless. Number five is Birmingham, Alabama. So, and, you really have to look at this and say to yourself, okay, how low can crime go? To me, crime can go as low as it need to go, because here's the other thing too. You got to understand that even like in New York, places like New York, if you're extremely soft on crime, because New York, a couple years back, they dropped this thing where, look, if it's under $1,000, then we're not even going to prosecute the crime, right? Now, as you see, New York, that's why I don't know about y'all who live in other cities, but if you're in New York, New Jersey, on the East Coast, I don't know how y'all living in the other cities, but I know out here you can't go. That's why you can't go into Walgreens. You can't buy soap. You can't get razors. You can't get toothpaste. All that shit is locked up behind glass. Even at a Walmart. Even at Walmart, you can't just, I got to sit and wait about 5 minutes for some employee to come open up the cabinet for me because people were stealing everything. That's, if it's under $1,000, no one's going to prosecute. Half the time people can just walk out with the stuff. And they've shown that in New York a lot of times, where at the CVS's, people will come in and just fill up stuff and just walk the hell out. The security guards ain't going to do anything, and they're instructed not to do anything. So I think crime is a real issue. How to deal with crime is complex, but I think that you have to prosecute. If you don't prosecute and you're not tough on crime, and there's not a deterrence to crime, people will commit it. This is not like, we live in America. We don't live in a country where morals and all that stuff, people are just morally like, oh, I shouldn't do this, and morally I was talking to someone last week. My wife and I were talking to someone. We were talking about Japan. I haven't been to Japan yet, but she was talking about Japan. And I talked to other people who have traveled different countries. But Japan, for an example, is extremely clean. There's not all this gum and wrappers and trash on the ground. And we don't live like that in America. People don't give a damn if you don't give people a deterrent in our country. Because the moral to depend on people morally to do the right thing, it ain't gonna happen here. It ain't, maybe somewhere else, but culturally we're too far gone. We